What's going on, YouTube? Welcome back to another video, and today I've got an update on my Rescue Ace deck profile. I know it's been a little bit since the ban list came out, but I'm finally done making changes to the deck, and I'm going to be honest, this feels a lot more consistent than my last build that I had. And without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and get started. And we're going to start off, obviously, in the Rescue Ace cards with 2 copies of Rescue Ace Hydrant, who, while you control another Rescue Ace, cannot be targeted for attacks or your opponent's card effects. And you can also activate a normal trap or quick play spell that was set by a Rescue Ace monster the turn it was set. And you can, once per turn, add a Rescue Ace monster from your deck to your hand. Super simple, super cool. I love this card. You don't ever really need more than one of it, or more than 2 of it, because then it gets kind of bricky. You don't want to see too many of them, and you're typically wanting to summon this from the deck, but normal summoning it is never bad. Then you've got 1 Rescue Ace Airlifter. Airlifter is a 1-card combo to set up a fair amount of interruptions. I say fair, I mean 4. And it also does it underneath Nibiru. Airlifter also, on normal or special, can add a Rescue Ace spell from your deck to your hand. And then when your opponent activates a monster effect on the field, you can tribute it from your hand or field to then summon a Rescue Ace monster from your hand. This card is really good, and yeah, I feel like this card should come back off of the list, because there's something in this deck that you can cut out, but I'll also talk about some other stuff that I've considered for the deck towards the end of the video. Next, we have Blackluster Soldier Rescue Ace Turbulence, and by that I just mean Rescue Ace Turbulence. The Blackluster Soldier reference was for the fact that it can banish 2 Rescue Ace cards from your graveyard in order to special summon itself. And then, once per turn, you can set up to 4 differently named Rescue Ace quick play spells and normal traps from your deck to your side of the field. And then, if your opponent destroys a card you control by card effect... Yes. If your opponent destroys a card you control by card effect, you can target a card on the field and destroy it. So, it gives you a little bit of, hey, you want to remove my stuff, I'm going to remove your stuff. Kind of trade deals to your opponent. Then we have 2 copies of Rescue Ace Preventer, who can special summon himself by banishing a singular Rescue Ace card from your graveyard. Has a quick effect while you control another Rescue Ace monster in order to Book of Moon an opponent's effect monster, and then if it is sent to the graveyard, you can special summon a banished Rescue Ace monster to your side of the field, except for a level 8. So let's say your Turbulence is banished, because Turbulence is a level 9 or 10. I believe 9. Don't quote me on that. So if you have a banished Rescue Ace Turbulence, you can summon it back. It can also summon back Airlifter and just about every Rescue Ace monster. And then for the only 3 of Rescue Ace monster that we are running 3 copies of Rescue Ace Impulse. Simply because it's the only one worth playing 3 that isn't Airlifter, where, you know, we're forced to only be playing the 1. And so what does Impulse do? Well, Impulse can target the monster your opponent controls with the highest amount of attack, and neither player can activate that monster's effects while it's on the field, but that's not the important part of Impulse. As broken as that effect is, that's sarcasm, I promise. When your opponent activates a monster effect on the board, you contribute it from hand or field in order to special summon a Machine Rescue Ace from the deck. So, going second, this card is really good, but going first... Well, going second, this card is really good because you can summon something from the deck before you even get a turn. Or going second, it puts extra forms of interaction or like niche use case monsters on the board, and those niche use cases that we are running are one-ofs with Fire Engine and Fire Attacker. Fire Engine both of them have the same line of text where if a rescue ace is summoned to your field, you can special summon them. Unless another copy of them is summoned. So if let's say I go normal summon Airlifter, I can go Chainlink 1 Airlifter, Chainlink 2 Fire Engine or Fire Attacker, special summon one of the two, and there you go. But if I was to special summon a Fire Engine, I can't summon another Fire Engine, so on and so forth. Fire Engine, whenever your opponent special summons a monster to their side of the field while it's face up, you can special summon a Rescue Ace monster from your hand, deck, or graveyard. And then Fire Attacker is whenever your opponent adds a card from their deck to their hand, except by drawing it. You can draw 2 cards and then discard 1 card. So both of them are very niche use cases, but they also provide you bonus advantage by simply just existing, and they're pretty big bodies. That is going to be it for the Rescue Ace monsters. Now we're going to get into the Rescue Ace spells and traps, which the only one that we are playing 3 of is Emergency. So all of the spells and traps that aren't the field spell have the same line of text on them, where they're always treated as Rescue Ace cards. That's important because they're all full capital single words. Emergency, in particular, can special summon a Rescue Ace monster from your deck in defense position, and then you tribute a Rescue Ace on your field or in your hand, and then you can banish it from the graveyard to set a Rescue Ace trap from the graveyard. Next, we're on 1 copy of Rescue Ace HQ, because HQ gives this deck almost infinite playability. So when your opponent has a monster on their side of the field, all of your monsters get a 500 attack and defense point boost. Then you also get an additional normal summon of a Rescue Ace monster. And on top of all of this, yeah, we're not done. This card goes hard. You can once per turn target 4 of your banished. Target 4 Rescue Ace cards that are banished or in your graveyard. Shuffle them back into the deck and draw a card. And the fact that it can also shuffle from banish means if they try to crow, I believe if they try to crow one of your like DD crow one of your targets in the graveyard, the effect still resolves because it can also shuffle from banish back into the deck. Correct me if I'm wrong on that one, but people really aren't playing DD Crow right now that I'm aware of. I know everybody's playing the Bystials because the Bystials are just better, but DD Crow is still a good card. Now for the plethora of one-ofs that we have 1 copy of Alert, which can add a Rescue Ace from your graveyard to your hand, or if you control Hydrant, you can add one from your deck to your hand. That is a caveat with all of these spells and traps that we're about to cover, where they get a bonus effect if you have Hydrant. So the main focus is to have Hydrant on the board. Hydrant protects itself because you're hiding behind the other Rescue Ace monsters. And then all of them, get bonus effects or are just blatantly stronger. Perfect example, Rescue. All of these are quick play spells, so, using them in response to things is viable. Whereas Rescue can target a Rescue Ace in your graveyard, or if you have Hydrant, you can target a monster in your opponent's graveyard and special summon it to your side of the field. Originally, I was talking about using this as a way to prevent Poplar from putting itself into the spell and trap zone, but right now this is more of a way to maybe put a Yubel on your side of the field and force your opponent to try and super poly off the Yubel if they don't do that. Or you can always grab an Engraver out of the graveyard before it gets summoned back, so on and so forth. This has a lot of niche use cases with the current meta, but it's still a really good form of interaction because you can also just bring back a wall and just wall up if you need to. Then we have 1 copy of Contain, which is a... Let me finish skimming it real quick. It negates the effects of a monster on the board, prevents it from attacking, and then if you have Hydrant, it can't be used for an extra deck summon, so your opponent can't use it for an XE Synchro, Fusion, or Link summon, which is really good. Really goated with the sauce on that one. God, I hate myself for saying that. And then lastly, we have one copy of Extinguish, which targets an infect monster your opponent controls, destroys it, and then if you have Hydrant, it prevents your opponent from using that card's effects that are in the graveyard. So if you were to pop a Yubel or something like that with this, while you at least have Hydrant, your opponent does not float off of the Yubel or whatever you decide to destroy, which is really, really good. This deck has a fairly decent matchup into the meta, and you can always add the Snake Eyes cards into here to make it, better and have better end boards, but I've opted not to do that. And then obviously there's also the blatant, thing you could add, being Fiendsmith for Caesar, but I'm good. Next, we have 2 copies of Blaster. So I started blasting. Why are we not focused? So Blaster, coming to 2. I was originally playing this at 1 because, it was at 1. Now I'm playing the 2. Tripod. But now I'm playing the 2. Blaster, if you don't know what he does, can pitch himself in a fire to pop a card, to target a card on the field and destroy it. He can also summon himself back from the graveyard by banishing a total of 2 fire and or dragons, excluding himself. And then if he's banished, you can add a fire dragon from your deck to your hand. We don't care about the fire dragon part. We don't care about the effect that he gets when he's banished, but we kind of do at the same time, because that means he cycles into the second copy of himself, because he's the only fire dragon we're playing, and he's also removal, and he loads up our graveyard, and he can also put cards into banish that we can then shovel back with HQ. So, really good card. And then one card that you could very easily cut out of this deck, especially if we get more copies of Airlifter, are 2 copies of Infernoble Arms Durandal. Durandal, while it's equipped, can add a level 5 or lower Fire Warrior from the deck to the hand. And then if the equipped monster was destroyed, and this card was destroyed because the equipped monster was destroyed, take a shot every time I say destroyed. Don't actually. That's a bad idea. You can summon a level 5 or lower Fire Warrior from your graveyard, which can inherently be Airlifter, but it could also be Impulse if you really need to. It also destroys itself after you add the monster from deck to hand. Just FYI, so you can't just add one from deck to hand and so on. This is an easy to side out of card. It's also a card that, helps you try to find your way into Airlifter when going second, because you can always put this onto an opponent's monster, try to add Airlifter. If they interrupt it, it's whatever. Then we have 1 copy of 1-for-1 as a way to get our Hydrant from the deck, obviously. Then we have 1 copy of Reinforcement of the Army, because, Airlifter's a warrior. Then we're also on the newly limited Pot of Prosperity, only playing 1 of it. And I'm not going to lie, with this card at 1, the deck is more consistent, which is weird. Because, I was playing 40 beforehand, and I had 3 Prosperity. And now that it's at 1, the deck feels more consistent. The Yu-Gi-Oh! Logic. And then obviously I'm also on the 1 copy of Called by the Grave, because Called by. It's a lot of 1-ofs in here, a lot of cards that are limited. Durandal, however, is definitely a very cuttable card. And you could technically cut out Prosperity, because you can utilize the entirety of your extra deck if need be. So that is it for the generic non-hand trap cards. Now we move on to our hand traps that we are on a fat stack of. Starting us off, we have 3 copies of Ash Blossom and Joyous Spring. Because, 3 copies of Effect Veiler, because one of the best cards in the format at the moment. 2 copies of Nibiru the Primal Being, another all-star into the format currently. 1 copy of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill. I'm mostly on this because I'm also on 3 copies of Infinite Impermanence, and Mourner serves as an extra copy of like Impermanent Veiler, but it also comes with the upside of burn damage, so it helps you push for lethal relatively well. And that is currently it for the main deck. Should be a 40 card main deck. I made sure to count it out before I did the deck profile. And now we're going to move on to the extra deck, which is a 15 card extra, which has some interesting picks in it. One of the not so interesting picks, one of the more obvious ones, is our thumbnail card, 1 copy of Promethean Princess, Bestower of Flames. If you don't know what Promethean Princess does, while she's on the field, you're locked into only being able to special summon fire monsters. And she can once per turn revive a fire monster from the graveyard. Then, if your opponent special summons or if a monster is special summoned to your opponent's side of the field, you can target a card you control and a card your opponent controls, destroy both of them, and special summon this card. There you go. That's a rough summary of what she does and what I have the knowledge of that she does. If she has some hidden effect, let me know, or you can read it yourself, and I'll find out later. Then I'm also on 1 copy of Salamangreat Sunlight Wolf because, funnily enough, this card is also part of a combo when pushing for lethal. You can always link off the Airlifter, or no, the Preventer and another monster into the Sunlight Wolf. Preventer can then summon back your Airlifter to then search a card, but chain blocked by Sunlight Wolf, or you summon it back to the zone. Sunlight Wolf points to, obviously. So then you can chain block the search for that, and on top of that, you also get to add the Preventer from your graveyard back to your hand. And then you can also summon the Preventer, which also just put it basically, this card lets you put 2 free bodies on the board via itself and Airlifter, because Preventer just summons itself back. Then we have the 1 copy of Salamangreat Raging Phoenix for the Promethean Princess package. I'm also running the a single copy of Ambler Whale because, you know, it's also usable within this. You don't have to run Ambler Whale if you don't want to. You could find another flex spot. You could definitely run like Access Code Talker. Whatever you want. It doesn't matter. Just whatever utility you think you can use. 1 copy of World Dragon Zealantis. World Sea Dragon Zealantis. It's part of the Promethean Princess OTK line. That is something complicated that I'm not even going to bother getting into. 1 copy of IP Masquerena and 1 copy of Nightmare Unicorn. I will say this much: if you do have a copy of SP Little Knight, I would recommend playing the Little Knight instead of the Unicorn. It just makes more sense. Then we're also on 1 copy of Underworld Goddess, 1 copy of Anima, 1 copy of Hita, 1 copy of Proxy F Magician, another card that is fairly cuttable if you don't want to be playing it. And then for, Proxy F Magician targets that you can fusion summon using its effects. Let me recenter. Sorry, I keep moving my camera around. But for our fusion targets with Proxy F Magician, we have 1 copy of Mud Dragon of the Swamp, just because Mud Dragon of the Swamp is good and prevents your fire monsters from being targeted if you call fire. And then 1 copy of Garura. Now, the last 2 slots in the extra deck were kind of hard for me to figure out and actually put together because I personally did not know what I wanted to fit in. I didn't know if I wanted to fit in utility link monsters, or if I wanted to fit in cards that could also mess around with some stuff in the side deck that would just be free prosperity targets in game 1. So I went with the second option here, where it was stuff that I can use to mess around with my side deck, or that I could use, well, one of these options, I went down the middle. I picked one that can utilize a card in my side deck that I'll show you when I get to the side deck, and then a utility card. That one card being Predaplant Trifio Veritum. Don't ask me to say that. We're going to call it Predaplant Triff because easier to say. Which this card is a solemn warning on legs. So if you control this fusion summon card, you can negate a special summon. Just because. Granted, its summoning condition is kind of steep. 3 dark monsters on the field, but let's be honest. What's a current deck that is meta that uses a bunch of dark monsters? I'll give you one hint. It starts with Y and is about a alien hermaphrodite. Yubel. Yeah. And then the utility card I chose was Typhon, because Typhon. And that is going to be it for the extra deck. Moving onward to the side deck, by the way, hero sleeves that I got a long time ago. I don't know from what. Side deck is very straightforward. We are on our 3rd copy of Nibiru here in the side deck because 3 Nibiru in the main deck feels bricky, especially into the meta where people might not be summoning 5 times, but I don't want to play 1 Nibiru because then that's just a sacky one of. 2 copies of Ghost Bell and Ghost Bell and Haunted Mansion, just for graveyard strategies that might be popping up now. I'm not 100% certain what's all in the meta, but Bell also might not be bad in the up-and-coming meta with Rage of the Abyss. It's good in Fiendsmith specifically, because you can always Bell the Lurie, and they don't get the Lurie back, which is niche. Then we're also on the other 2 copies of Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, because Ghost Mourner and Moonlit Chill, like I said, is extra copies of Valor and Imperm, with the upside of being Burn, which is good in time, and so on. Then the card that I was referencing when talking about cards in the side deck, my 2 copies of Super Polymerization. I would be playing 3, but the side deck was kind of tight, trying to figure out everything to put in here. And I feel like Super Poly is good specifically into Yubel, because you can always Super Poly, use 3 of your opponent's dark monsters, make a 3,000 monster that can also just special summon itself back from the graveyard on top of being a summon negate. So, there's that. Then we're also on 2 copies of Triple Tactics Talents, just because Talents has flexibility. If you have Triple Tactics Thrust, you can 100% be playing Thrust in here, as well as maybe a one-off, instead of playing like another. You could probably replace one of the Mourners with a copy of Talents, or not Talents, Thrust. So there's that. Then we're also, as you guys probably saw out of the corner of the camera, 3 copies of Dimensional Barrier for Yubel, and Fiendsmith, and Tenpai, and so on. And then last card in the side deck is our 3 copies of Evenly Matched. Just because this deck can OTK, but that doesn't necessarily mean you have to OTK. And it's not the easiest to OTK through multiple interactions, so if you can mitigate some of the interactions on your opponent's board, or force out some interactions, this card actually just is really good into the current format. And forcing out monster effects also means you can brute force a Triple Tactics Talents, and also, just generically good overall. And with that, give me one moment, I'll be right back. And with that, that's the deck. If you guys did enjoy this, please be sure to hit that like button. We're so close to 250. And last little closing thoughts. One thing I've thought about playing in this deck is the Super Heavy Samurai engine, which would be 3 Motorbike, 1 Wakaushi, 1 Monk Benkei, and then a single copy of the Soul Gaia booster. In order to make a level 10 synchro, you can make any level 10 synchro with that. And on top of that, I've also been taking a lot of notes over a bunch of different decks, building deck lists, and so on. And in fact, I should have another deck lined up to revise or come back to that I haven't touched in quite some time. I actually have multiple decks that I want to come back to that I haven't in quite some time. And if you guys have any suggestions on decks to make, please be sure to suggest decks that aren't $1,000 to build, because I don't have $1,000 lying around to just build Fiendsmith, Snake Eye, and the likes. So yeah, like I said, I was thinking about putting the Super Heavy Samurai engine in here to make a level 10 synchro. You can make like Cheng Ying. Dissipator is always a good one. Dissipator can negate something by shuffling a banished monster back into the deck. And with shifter decks kind of being more powerful now, it would make sense to have a Dissipator. And like I said, with that, I'm going to call it here, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.